Oh, hi. It's me, the Lady Miss VaginaJenkins, and it is time for queer astrology. And yes, before you ask, my hair is, in fact, full of secrets and the mysteries of the universe. And speaking of the mysteries of the universe, let's talk about the moon again. Specifically, I'm developing my own Hoodoo-centered astrology theory around the moon and how it shows up as a transiting moon and rituals and things that we can do to work with that transiting moon, and the way that the moon shows up in our natal chart, in terms of its relationship to the sun in our natal charts. So yeah, these are the two parts of the theory that I want to sort of talk out, and I just want to hear these ideas out loud because that's part of how I process things. And also I want to be in conversation with y'all, so let me know if any of this resonates with you, or if you have any pushback. I'm definitely open to hearing that. And yeah, comment below if you're feeling any of this or want to push back. Generally speaking, I always offer up the guideline that the moon comes to us in sort of 6-month cycles. And in addition to like its monthly cycle, but if you think about, like, for example, right now, this is the Pisces new moon. This is the start of a cycle of moon energy around Pisces. And then 6 months from now, when it is Virgo season, we will experience the culmination of the moon in Pisces cycle, when it gets to be Virgo season and we have the full moon in Pisces. So when I think about like the new moon and rituals or workings that we could do to work with the energy of the new moon, I think about how the new moon is darkness. I think about it as a place of starting because it is the start of this cycle, the 6-month cycle. I think of it a lot as the seed being planted in the darkness kind of vibe or energy. And so I've always thought of new moons as a place to start a particular working. And then when I think about full moons, I think about the full illumination and the fullness of the moon, and we get it to decide if we want to harvest or let go of or release what we have cultivated over the last 6 months in terms of that particular energy. I would also add in the mode and the element part of the moon. For example, looking at the new moon in any given mode, cardinal, fixed, or mutable. A new moon in a cardinal sign might ask you what endeavor you want to start or create, whereas a new moon in a fixed sign might ask you what you want to have continued success with, something that you're already working and committed to, or maybe you want to renew your commitment to a particular endeavor. And then the mutable moon might ask you what you would like to shift or transform in your life or adapt to in your life in some kind of way. Elements could also be important. So a new moon in a fire sign, what new passions, creativities, exciting things do we want to experience? A new moon in an air sign, what new communications, connections, ideas do we want to develop? Or a new moon in a earth sign, what material realities do we want to manifest or make real in our material realm? Or a new moon in a water sign might ask us about what new spiritual practices, intuitive practices, emotional health, mental health sorts of things we might like to embark upon. I say all this to like underline the fact that like not every new moon is going to be good for every person to think about beginning a journey of manifestation with. You know, like, yes, because a new moon is planting a seed, we can start new manifestations, bringing these new things into our lives according to these modes and elements. But it's really important to understand the way that your energy works, particularly as it relates to your natal chart and astrology, to understand if you should even be working with any particular lunation. These modes and elements are also something that you can consider as it relates to the full moon or the quarter moon or any other moon. So just keep in mind the modes and the elements. So that's like the hoodoo part of the equation, understanding how the moon is a cycle and how there are places that are more conducive to beginning and there are more places that are conducive to letting go, releasing, or harvesting. And then looking at the astrology half of the equation, you have the moon in your chart and it is making aspects to your sun that are a lot like the ways that the transiting moon is making aspects to the transiting sun and influencing us from the external. I want to think about the natal chart as an internal manifestation of these new moons, full moons, quarter moons. For example, say you had a Pisces sun and a Gemini moon. That is the sun and the moon making a square to each other. And what kinds of meanings can we make or understand based on that setup? Just the purposes of this video, I'm gonna concentrate on three main aspects: the conjunction, the square, and the opposition, because those would be the same as the new moon, the quarter moon, and the full moon. To explain it more clearly for folks that might not have thought about this before, when the moon and the sun are conjunct, so in the exact same sign, that is a new moon in the sky. And so what would that feel like if you had a new moon in your chart? And then the same with the opposition, the sun being directly opposite, 180 degrees away from the moon, would be the equivalent of a full moon in the sky. So what does it feel like to have a full moon in one's chart? And then, you know, halfway between those two polarities is 90-degree angle between the sun and the moon, the quarter moon. So what does that feel like to have that in your chart? And this is the kind of this is the place where I'm sort of theorizing. So when I think about the sun and the moon in the natal chart, I think about the light that you are walking towards in your journey of life. So that's the sun. Sort of the light at the end of the tunnel, the thing that you are aspiring to, a little bit about your vitality, that kind of thing. So more like this light that we are walking towards. And when I think about the moon, I think about the illumination of our internal mental landscape. And so yes, our emotional and mental health, but also some of the shadow sides to ourselves. Hi, this is me coming to you from the editing room, which is my couch and my laptop. But I did not like the way that I talked about how the experiences of the moon conjunction, the new moon, full moon, quarter moon, how those show up in the natal chart. So I wanted to talk about them hopefully more clearly here in this moment. So what I was curious about is, in a natal chart, if you have the sun and moon conjunct in the same sign, what is that experience? Could that potentially be the experience of someone who feels like they are at the beginning of some sort of emotional cycle, or maybe it's the mental landscape that is more anticipatory, more excited about things, if that makes any sense. And then the opposite of that would be the the moon opposing the sun, And then that's a full moon, technically speaking, in the natal chart. And what is that experience like? Since we know the full moon is often about endings, harvests, releasing, letting go, what is that mental landscape like? Is it more the mental landscape of a person who feels maybe like an old soul, maybe the sort of person who feels more content in their life, not necessarily so much anticipatory, but maybe more reflective? And then we have the two quarter moons, both the waxing and the waning quarter moon, the moon getting bigger or the moon getting smaller. And so that is in the natal chart, that would look like the moon square the sun. And then what is that emotional experience like? Squares, generally speaking, are some sort of crisis or some sort of tension. Because squares are in the same modality, at least they have that in common, but they're usually or not even usually, they always are in incompatible elements. So fire with water, earth with air. And so that's a lot of tension to hold in one's natal chart, one's energetic blueprint. What kind of crises sort of show up? And then also, is it different on either side? It seems to me that the difference between the quarter moons and how they might feel in a person's natal chart might be the difference between applying versus separating aspects. In astrology, when planets are moving closer to each other, that's an applying aspect. And when they're moving further away from each other, that's a separating aspect. So it seems to me that the quarter moon that is waxing, getting bigger, is a separating aspect. It is the moon moving away from the sun. And what I've noticed about separating aspects in a natal chart is that they tend to be more reactive and reflective, like, oh, what just happened and what can I learn from this? And that implies to me that that is about external events. I'm reacting to external events. I'm reacting and reflecting on external events that happen. So external events that may upset the mental landscape in some kind of way, causing that kind of tension and crisis that squares are known for, excuse me. And then on the other half of the equation, we have the quarter moon, so the moon square sun, that is waxing, getting smaller and moving closer to the sun, closer to that new moon, where the moon and sun are conjunct. And so that is very much an applying aspect. And in my experience, what I've noticed with applying aspects is that it tends to be more receptive and proactive. And so it's the vibe, the energy of what will happen. How can I anticipate things? And that seems to me to be a more internal experience. And so I'm wondering about a mental landscape that is more about internal crises or internal tensions to the mental landscape than external events like the other side of things. Hopefully that makes sense. It feels like it makes more sense as I'm explaining it now. And of course, this goes without saying, yes, I'm looking at these 4 angles, trying to sort of get my theory together. Very few people will have placements exactly at 4 angles, 180 degrees, 0 degrees, 90 degrees. And so I'm trying to understand the angles so I can figure out the places in the middle. Basically, establishing this pattern will help me figure out the places that are in the middle of all of this. Because, yeah, I was not born with an exact moon opposition or square. I was born with a moon quincunx, part of the waxing gibbous moon. To recap, my hoodoo brain tells me that the moon has a clear cycle of planting a seed, going into harvest, And then my astrology brain tells me that there is something about looking at the exact angles where the sun and moon are at 0 degrees of each other, 90 degrees of each other, and 180 degrees of each other. And that indicates something about the mental landscape of folks, depending on the aspect between these two planets. If they are conjunct, blending their energies, if they are square each other, in incompatible elements, or if they are opposite of each other in compatible elements. And what does that mean in terms of the mental landscape of a person? So yeah, that is me just trying to talk out my ideas about my theory of the moon, combining my hoodoo knowledge of the moon and my astrology knowledge of the moon and natal chart aspects. I very rarely see these perspectives combined, and so thank you for the space to talk out these ideas. And yeah, let me know if any of these ideas resonate with you, if you have pushback about them, whether you come from the hoodoo ATR space or a different witchy or magical cultural tradition, or if you're an astrologer. Let me know your thoughts. Comment below. Anywho, that is the video. Thank you for listening to me ramble about my theories. And yeah, thank you as always for watching and for making time for queer astrology.